You know, for over 80 years, the US-UK special relationship has been a real cornerstone of global security. But let's be honest, in a world of AI, crazy supply chain shocks, and new geopolitical rivalries, that historic partnership is getting a serious 21st century upguard. Today, we are breaking down the Atlantic Declaration.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll get into why this update was even needed in the first place. Then, we'll define what the Atlantic Declaration actually is. From there, we'll walk through its 5-pillar action plan with a big focus on future tech and wrap it all up by looking at why this new kind of alliance is such a big deal.
So, first things first, why now? Why does an alliance that was basically forged in the fires of the 20th century need to be completely reimagined for the world we live in today?
The original agreement, the Atlantic Charter, was signed way back in 1941. I mean, think about that. It set this incredible vision for the post-war world. A landmark deal for its time, for sure. But the world it was built for? Well, that world is long gone.
See, back then, the big challenges were pretty straightforward. You had traditional countries, and the goal was to build a stable order after the war. But today, the whole landscape has been flipped on its head. We're dealing with new kinds of threats, from authoritarian states like Russia and China, technology that's changing everything overnight, climate change, and this new reality where you just can't separate a country's economy from its national security. They're totally intertwined.
So, to meet all these modern challenges head-on, the US and UK have put together a whole new framework. Let's dig into what the Atlantic Declaration is really all about.
Okay, and this is the absolute key. This isn't your grandfather's military treaty. The document itself calls it a first-of-its-kind economic partnership. The whole idea is to adapt the alliance for this new era by focusing on how technology, economic stability, and national security are all connected. And the goals they've laid out are crystal clear. First, build supply chains that are actually secure and don't rely on just one or two countries, especially not your rivals. Second, make sure you're leading the pack in the technologies that are going to define our future. And maybe most importantly, make sure all this new tech actually works for democracies, not against them.
Now, that all sounds great on paper, right? But how are they actually going to pull it off? Well, that brings us to the action plan, the real how-to guide for this whole partnership.
But before we dive into the plan, just take a second to appreciate the ground it's built on. We're talking about the single largest bilateral investment relationship on the planet. It's worth over $1.5 trillion and supports almost 3 million jobs. So yeah, the stakes are massive, which is why this new plan is so ambitious.
And to protect this massive relationship and get it ready for the future, the strategy has 5 main pillars. It's all about leading in critical tech, teaming up on economic security, managing our digital future, building a clean energy economy, and of course, strengthening the core defense alliance itself.
Okay, let's zoom in on what's really the beating heart of this whole declaration, the technologies that are basically kicking off the next industrial revolution.
Under that first pillar, the two countries got super specific about the tech they think will shape our world. We're talking about AI, quantum computing, the tiny semiconductors that power literally everything, next-gen telecoms like 5G and 6G, and even synthetic biology. The goal here isn't just to compete, it's to lead together.
But look, it's not just about inventing cool new stuff. It's also about protecting it. Pillar 2 is all about upgrading their security toolkits, things like export controls and screening investments, to make sure that all this sensitive tech doesn't end up in the hands of countries that might use it against them.
And you know, these aren't just vague promises. Pillar 3 lays out concrete actions. They're actually building a data bridge to let data flow securely between the two countries. The UK is hosting a global summit on AI safety, and they're working together on privacy tech so data can be used in a way that's both powerful and responsible.
So we've covered the tech, but the impact of this declaration goes way beyond that. Let's look at the last 2 pillars and see how this all plays out in the real world, from the energy you use to national defense.
This is a perfect example of where the rubber meets the road. Pillar 4 is all about building a clean energy economy. So the US and UK are working on a deal for critical minerals, specifically targeting the 5 key ingredients for EV batteries that you see here. The goal? To secure that supply chain so they're not dependent on other countries for these absolutely vital resources.
And finally, Pillar 5 ties this whole economic plan right back to defense. The US is planning to classify the UK as a domestic source under its Defense Production Act. Now, this might sound technical, but it's a huge deal. It basically cuts through mountains of red tape, making it way easier for their defense industries to work together on massive projects,
like the AOKS nuclear-powered submarines.
When you boil it all down, this whole declaration is driven by a deep sense of urgency. This quote from the document itself just says it all. The argument is that the biggest challenges we face are economic, and the only way to tackle them is to lead together.
Which leads us with a pretty fascinating question to think about. For most of modern history, alliances were all about military pacts and counting tanks. Is this new model, one built on integrated economies, shared tech leadership, and secure supply chains, is this the new blueprint for what it means to be an ally in the 21st century?